What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Hobby Hotline this week. Thank you all for joining us today after the National. I'm sure a lot of us are still recovering. I'm Adam from Heroes for Sale, and I'm here with Chris, Chris Harris from Stale Gum, right, Chris?
Right. Yeah.
And then Brody the Kid. Chris, I'll start with you. How you doing? How you doing this week? Are you still recovering?
I'm recovering. My one big pickup from the National was a sinus infection. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
fortunately, I
could
went to
have
the
been worse.
doctor and got a Z-Pack, and it's clearing up on its own. So
good. Love to hear that.
yeah.
Brody, how are you doing? Are you still recovering? I know you had a baseball tournament, but you were at the National a bunch of the days. How are you doing after that long week?
Hey, I'm doing better. It's getting there, Slept in a couple days, getting there.
Yeah, same. I mean, I got back Sunday afternoon around probably 6 or 7, and I just slept until the next morning. I slept through the night, which I usually don't, but for that, I mean, I definitely did. So I'm sure everybody is tired of hearing about the National. There was all the National prep. There's all the recap stuff for the National. Chris, I'll start with you. We'll just give some final thoughts here. How did the show go for you? What are kind of your final thoughts on the show overall?
Well, first of all, I've never seen this. This was my 15th National that I've gone to, and I've never seen anything like that. Just the crowds. And even with the expanded, when they added that additional wing, just the people just kept coming and coming. We did set the all-time attendance record from 1991, but I think the question needs to be said, though, but has the National gotten too big for its purposes? Because I spent 5 days on the floor in the National, and I know I did not see everything. I did not pass by every table. I mean, you couldn't have.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, I see sort of your point, but I also think the Nationals become, I think it's become almost more than just a card show, in my opinion. I think nowadays it's you saw all the corporate booths, all the crazy stuff, golden, you got all bringing the one of one Giannis card, the one of one Steph Curry, you got all these crazy $1 million cards that are there. I think, if you're going there for the card show, it's probably a little bit overwhelming. There is a ton of booths, there is a ton of space. But yeah, I mean, I guess I sort of see your point, and I think it's just honestly become more of, it's a combination of a card show and sort of a museum nowadays. So Brody, how about you? What did your final thoughts kind of after the National? What did you think?
Yeah, man, it was awesome. 6th National, and it was crazy. The one thing that I thought was awesome is there was not a spot where you could go and it wasn't crowded. Everywhere you went, it was crowded. You couldn't be like, well, let's go sit over here because I don't think it'll be crowded. Nope, it's crowded over there. It's crowded over here. It's crowded over there. Over here, it's crowded. There was just so much to do. Like you said, a card collector, memorabilia, anything you could do. Wild Card had an awesome wheel. Wax collectors, anything. There was so much stuff to do. I had a great time.
Yeah, I mean, I did as well. I think, like I said, we were doing this show on the main stage, which, I mean, I love. That was a ton of fun, meeting everybody again for the first time, seeing everybody, doing this first time on the main stage for me. So that was really cool. I mean, I think actually my kind of one thought that I definitely got wrapped up in this is I think a lot of people were saying the hobby isn't dead, but I think it's sometimes within sports cards, there are these straw man arguments that we create that nobody is really saying the thing that we're saying these people are saying. So in my head, I think, the phrase, the hobby is dead, the hobby is not dead. I think actually nobody was saying that. I think it was more or less just, like I said, I got caught up in it. I definitely was one of the people who was just don't believe the people who were saying that, but honestly, in reality, nobody was really saying that to begin with. So, I think I'm going to be retiring that phrase from my repertoire of stuff. We'll just do one more round here. Chris, did you have any, final thoughts on the National before we move on to kind of the big story here?
I do want to give a shout out to the Gary V collectors out there. I was introduced to some of them, and I don't know whether it's appropriate to have non-sport at something called the National Sports Collectors Convention. We can have that debate as much as we want, but these people are fanatics about this. The V Friends. I couldn't believe it. So I don't understand it. I don't get it. But then again, a lot of people don't understand or get what we do either. So,
Right. Yeah.
So hats off to those guys.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that Gary's booth was busy pretty much the whole weekend, and he started out kind of. He's been coming to a bunch of nationals. I would say, this was probably his biggest display that he's had at any of the nationals. And I mean, I guess I would consider myself as someone who follows him and has followed him for a while. So I kind of have followed the trajectory of kind of seeing the inception of him actually drawing these things, and then he sold the graded versions of them at Christie's, like the art auction house, which was pretty wild. Like, so it is cool to kind of see the inception and see where it's come now, because now this week he also had some I think he had some other stuff that he's doing with them. Yeah, I mean, I also was very impressed by the booth, and how electric that booth was the whole weekend. It was wild. So Brody, like I said, final thoughts, and then we'll move on to the big story.
Yeah, man, I loved Wild Card. That's my
Brody?
shout out. Wild Wheel, the Wild Wheel, free wheel. You could just go on the line. And it was.
Am I
awesome.
frozen?
You're fine. Yeah.
Uh-oh. Hey, you guys there?
We're here.
Did I just freeze or something?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Weird. I don't know. My camera froze for a second. Okay. Well, sorry. So, Brody, what are your, final thoughts on the national? And then we'll move on to the big story that came out this week.
I thought Wild Card was awesome. I had their free wheel, and it was pretty fun.
Yeah. Love that. So the big,
but before we move on,
go ahead, Chris.
There is a question in the chat that I want to answer. U.S. Sports Cards has, Chris, have you ever gone to the East Coast National? If so, what is your perspective of that show? So the East Coast National is the White Plains show, or it used to take place in White Plains. Now I think it's out in Long Island somewhere. It is probably the biggest annual show in the New York City area. I have gone to it. I don't go to it that much anymore, mainly because a lot of the dealers that set up at the National also set up in White Plains. So I kind of already seen most of the inventory. So when I used to live in New Jersey, yes, I would go up to White Plains, but now that I don't, it's not really worth the drive. If you didn't go to the National, then it might be worth the drive for you. But yeah, it's annually. It's the biggest show in the New York City area, and it's worth going to once. So especially if you didn't go to the National that year. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I also want to give, before we move on, I want to give a shout out to everybody commenting in the chat. What's up, everybody? Thank you for commenting. We always love those. Make sure to like and subscribe here, and then also let us know where you're watching the show from. I'm always interested. That's one of the cool parts about shows like this on the internet is like people can watch it from wherever. So definitely want to know where you guys are watching from, or girls, I guess, if there's any women that are watching as well. I don't know if there is, but either way, comment, let us know where you comment, let us know where you're watching the show from. See, here we go. We got Oklahoma, Nebraska, Wisconsin. We got a couple people near you, Brody. That's cool. OKC area. That's fun. Always fun. So, I mean, the big story, I'm sure everybody was expecting us to talk about this today, is going to be the Panini Fanatics lawsuit, I guess you could call. I mean, it is a lawsuit that apparently has come out. I'm going to pull up Paul Lesko. Yeah, he is the hobby's lawyer, essentially. He's found the niche of being a lawyer in the hobby, which is, you always love to see that. Let's see. Let's do a screen share. We'll pull up his tweet. Pull that up here. Panini is suing Fanatics for antitrust. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like it doesn't really, like, we've gone from Fanatics potentially buying Panini over the past few months to now, and then Fanatics taking some of Panini's employees, and now Panini is suing. Panini is suing Fanatics for antitrust. I mean, Chris, I'll start with you. I'm actually going to pull up the Wall Street Journal article as well, just so we can look at that too. But from your perspective, like, what are your initial thoughts on this, on the lawsuit so far?
Okay, so I think a lot of people that have followed me on Twitter and regularly watch this show probably know this, but my day job, I work for the federal government, and part of my job is antitrust enforcement. Now, I don't want to portray myself as an expert on antitrust, but nor do I want to say that what I'm about to say is not the opinion of the Federal Trade Commission. It's just myself. So with that out of the way, the last major antitrust case that we had involving sports was a case called American Needle. And this took place about 20 years ago. American Needle was a company that had a license, a non-exclusive license, to make souvenir baseball caps for the NFL. And they had this license for years. And then the NFL came up with a deal with Reebok to be the exclusive outfitter. They were going to outfit all 32 teams with their uniforms. Before that, if you ever seen like a football game from the 90s or something, you'll notice that each team is wearing different uniform manufacturers. Some teams are wearing Adidas, some teams are wearing Champion, some teams are wearing Russell Athletic. But beginning in, I think it was 2002 or 2003, every team would be wearing Reebok. And I think about 10 years ago, that contract went to Nike. So every team wears Nike now. But as part of that contract, that also included the exclusive right for souvenir apparel and replica clothing, to include hats. So overnight, this company, American Needle, loses its license, and they decided to file an antitrust lawsuit against Reebok and the NFL. And this case took, I think, 7 or 8 years to get to the Supreme Court. And 2011 or 2012, I think it was decided. And it was decided unanimously, 9-0. So on the one hand, you had the conservative wing of the court, the Clarence Thomases and Scalia's, agreeing with the Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the liberal wing of the court. 9-0 that here was the decision was the NFL was structured in a way that although they compete on the field as 32 different teams, collectively they serve as a single entity. And as a single entity, they could choose to do business with whomever they want to, or not do business with whomever they want to. And it's not an antitrust violation to grant an exclusive license, which is what they did with Reebok. And in the years since, of course, we've seen exclusive licenses. First, I think the first big exclusive license was the Madden game that came in 2005-ish. There were at one time more than one NFL football games. And I think NFL 2K5 came out. Mm-hmm. And to this day, a lot of people still think it's the best NFL football game ever made. So, and the following year, just, EA Sports just backed up the Brinks truck and asked for an exclusive license, and they got it. And leagues figured out that licensees were willing to pay a premium for exclusivity. So then a few years around the same time, Upper Deck made their deal with the NHL to be the exclusive licensee. Panini came in and became the exclusive NBA licensee. And then, of course, Topps got the exclusive baseball license.
Mm-hmm.
So we've now seen Fanatics come on the scene like 2 years ago. They kind of blindsided everybody in the hobby. When they, I remember 2 years ago at the National when Fanatics had a booth set up, and nobody was talking about Fanatics acquiring these licenses.
Yeah, one cold December or January night, Fanatics came in and basically swooped in, which was pretty wild.
Yeah. And they did it like a couple of weeks before Topps was supposed to go public with that big SPAC acquisition.
Yes, that's right.
That was going to make Michael Eisner $600 million. And that kind of tells you how ruthless Fanatics does business. And we've seen this, acquiring the baseball license right before Topps goes public, poaching Panini's employees, trying to bully them out before their license is expired. So really, an antitrust lawsuit for Panini is probably their last best hope of retaining anything. And the way this court case might play out, it may take years, and it may take millions of dollars in lawyers' fees, but people may not understand just how big Panini actually is. It's not just Panini America. It's Panini in Europe. They make a ton of money every year selling soccer stickers.
Mm-hmm.
They may have the money to wait this one out. And the strategy here may not necessarily be to win this lawsuit. It may be to settle it so that they may get a partial license or a sub-license out of it. So that, instead of winning this case and getting their license back, they may settle for putting out a sub-license that allows them to get 4 or 5 products per sport per year. So that's where I think this may be going, that this lawsuit may just be for Panini to save face and get something out of it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we're still sort of early on in this process. The lawsuits come out. Like I said, Paul Lesko, I think on Twitter, he did a really good job of breaking it down. So Brody, I'll kick to you. Actually, have you dove into this lawsuit? Like, have you followed any of the stuff that's going on in Twitter? What are some of your initial thoughts on this going on?
All right, give me my popcorn. I'm watching Chris Harris in action. Give me my popcorn. Time to one up them. Come on. Yeah, I mean, I watched Chris Harris in action, but let him keep going, man.
Sure. So I'll actually read this quote. So what Fanatics has done is essentially lock out the competition. Literally for decades, all 3 major sport trading card markets. I don't know if that sentence makes a lot of sense. That obviously hurts consumers, said the chairman, law firm representing Panini. Fanatics behavior is the behavior of a typical monopolist, which I'm actually surprised I was able to pronounce that word. Now, I think it's interesting that that a Panini representative is talking about hurting customers after years of Panini just flooding the market with, just completely destroying Select, coming out with, I don't know. I mean, I would say it's been the QC, the QA, whatever it is from these cards that are coming out have been really not good over the past couple of years since they've been increasing the production. So I just think it's kind of interesting that someone representing Panini is trying to come out and say what Fanatics is doing is bad for the customers. Now, I don't necessarily know one way or the other. It really is just going to depend on how Fanatics does. Like if Fanatics turns into, you used EA and Madden, for example, if if Fanatics somehow does what Madden does, and they just basically come out with the same game every single year, and there's still issues and there's still bugs and there's still, you got to update the game and you got to do all this, and if somehow that happens within Fanatics, that would probably be a bad thing. But it's like if they come out with there's other gaming companies that come out with new games, like and they end up being good every year. So it's like it depends, I guess. So Chris, I guess I'll you can maybe comment on that quote, or if you have any other thoughts. I mean, definitely.
Well, we've kind of seen. You mentioned, Madden is basically the same game every year. Well, Topps and Panini basically make the same product every year. They
right.
use a little, they change the design, but just take a look at Topps flagship every year. It's 660 cards. The same parallels. There's always in every Topps baseball product some kind of reprint insert. I mean, when was the last time that Topps did anything new or original? Well,
I mean, up until
this year's big league.
Up until this year, I think
new.
And then the debut patches, I think Fanatics has kind of come in. I mean, I think we've seen at least a little bit more innovation since Fanatics has come in. Like, they got the NIL licenses. They've been coming out with some of the, the actual NIL products like Bowman and then not like it, because I think the big difference between those products and what Panini was coming out with was that these players are still in college when the products are coming out versus they have to be drafted. They were all the college products for Panini, the Zions, all the products are coming out after they get drafted. So it's like, people don't care as much because now they have actually the professional cards where, for example, we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, like the Victor Wembanyama card, he was drafted, but like the product came out before he was drafted. And, the 1 of 1 was recently pulled. I'll actually, I'll pull another quote here from Fanatics. In a statement, a Fanatics spokesperson called the lawsuit a baseless, last grasp, failing effort by a company that has lost touch with its customers, is failing in the marketplace and has tried unsuccessfully for years to sell itself. It added, at Fanatics, we remain focused on innovation and working to improve an industry that has been sleepily led by Panini for years. That is hilarious. First of all, that is a very funny quote by someone at Fanatics. I don't know who, I don't know if that's Michael Rubin saying that or who at Fanatics is saying that, but that is hysterical that they actually came out and we're just
very Rubin-esque.
Right. Yeah. Very, very like, they were like, oh, Panini, you're, you care about the customers. Like you haven't cared about customers for years. That's basically what they're saying. Like, which is kind of what I was saying as well, so it really is. I mean, that's a very funny quote.
People don't like Panini rewards points.
Right. Yeah. They don't like expiring the expiring redemptions. I mean, look, Panini, they've almost failed upwards, in my opinion, over the past few years with sports cards and the Zion craze and the Trevor Lawrence craze and the LaMelo Ball craze. It's like it all kind of was like a perfect storm for them where they could kind of just do business as usual and, like I said, not really maybe innovate as much. And I think that actually unfortunately, I think it's a decent representation on sort of what Panini has done, in my opinion. Brody, I'll ask you this question. I guess maybe I'll frame it in a way like, as a teenager, you have been doing cards and stuff like that since you were like a little kid, basically, like Brody the Kid, So like, is this something where, the issues that Panini sometimes has with some of these cards, is that something that you have noticed that like people your age really care that much about? Or, from your perspective, like is what Panini has done really that much of an issue, I guess, from your perspective as somebody who is like a teenager right now?
I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, because obviously I see, because I might pull Panini reward points or I might pull redemption that I might not get. But I don't know if 10-year-old in a shop, I don't know if they get reward points. Do they get mad about it? I don't really know. Or if do they open enough product to get points eventually, I don't really know. So that it's kind of a tough one, but they might get excited because they think it's like a hit.
Mm.
So maybe they get excited about it. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. And so do you think, I mean, I know everybody at this point has given their take on Fanatics versus Panini versus Topps versus everything. Like Fanatics coming in, I mean, is that something that excites you? I mean, I like I said, I know everybody's sort of giving their take at this point, but from your perspective, like, do you think Fanatics will be able to succeed, or do you see that maybe things are going to take a step back over the next few years if Fanatics, doesn't change anything, I guess?
I mean, I'm excited because wrestling, I mean, I'm a huge wrestling collector, and Panini's wrestling has been really good. So I'm excited for what Fanatics gets wrestling because I think they're gonna have to really see what Panini's done and take it to a whole nother level. Because I think they want to beat Panini, and to beat Panini, they're going to be really, really good. So and that's just wrestling. And when you talk
Right.
about football and basketball, they're going to have Topps Chrome and all this stuff that they've done for baseball. And when they put out Topps Baseball, they had these new parallels like the Taco Fractor and the Frozen Fractor. And I think it's cool. It's new innovations, and they could do stuff like that while they have this license.
Right. Exactly. And I think this quote actually here is kind of a perfect example, in my opinion, of I think it's an example of Panini not realizing that they really failed upwards with sports cards over the past few years. So the lawsuit says that through superior innovation and competitive success, Panini achieved great results for the leagues and reliably increased revenue. According to figures from the company, its trading card business has grown from $200 million in 2017 to over $1 billion in 2022. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that's just all they had to really do was just come out with more. If you look at that 2017 date and you look at that compared to how much product is out in the market now, I think that's a perfect example of they just came out with more product. I don't necessarily think it wasn't superior innovation that they did. All they did was just produce more product and sell it. Like, so Chris, I'll kick it over to you here. Like, a couple of the quotes that I pulled here. What are kind of your thoughts on that stuff?
That's
like
kind of exactly what they did was and then again, this also coincided with the pandemic. And
right.
people started getting into cards. We all remember what happened in 2020 and 2021. People camping out for blasters, people posting their attics full of Panini blasters, Yeah, I mean, what exactly did Panini do other than increase production? I mean, Select used to be a hobby-only product. Now you can find it in blaster form on retail shelves. What makes that Select any different than Panini Prism anymore? It's basically Panini Prism Series 2 now.
Right.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would be interested. Panini keeps saying that they've been innovating. I would be interested to know. If I'm Fanatics, I would come out in this lawsuit and be like, tell us what you did that was innovative. Like that's the next step that I would do for. And I don't know, this might even be a scenario where like this is going to, I don't think this is going to go well for Panini. Like, I just don't see how all this is going to really do, in my opinion, is hurt Panini's value and make it easier for Fanatics to buy them, or like for them to do something. Like, I don't know what their end goal is here. Like, Chris, so what do you think? What do you think the end goal with this lawsuit is?
I think you'll be surprised. Panini is a lot bigger than you think. I think it's in their best interest to keep this lawsuit going and maybe, like I said, sue and settle. Keep this lawsuit going and then see if you can get either get Fanatics to buy you out at market price, not at a cut rate price, or maybe just to get a sub license out of it.
Right. And I actually want to highlight Philly Joe's comment here. Is it possible that people hobbying don't care about what happens to modern cards? We have 150 years of cards to get involved in. I'll ask you this question, Brody. Like, for you, like, you said you're into wrestling. Where, like, what kind of cards are you interested in? Because I think that's an interesting question. Like, modern cards, like, I wonder, 20, 30 years from now, what this era is going to look like. But, like, for you, like, what are you into, I guess is maybe the question. Like, are you into modern stuff? Or are you into maybe more 90s, or kind of like, what are the vibes when you're like looking for cards?
I'm mainly into modern stuff, but I mean, it's a lot of wrestling stuff and a lot of new baseball stuff because I'm a huge baseball fan. But I used to collect, used to be a lot of football and basketball, but I mean, you could tell that the production of football and basketball has, been really high lately. Um, but I mean, obviously we're in the off season of football, so that demand kind of goes down a little bit. But now we're going back in, so we'll see how that changes. But it'll be interesting too, like if once, because when Tops lost the license, or I mean, I don't, yeah, lost the license for wrestling. There were some products that I still like collecting for Tops Wrestling when Panini was putting out wrestling products too. So it's kind of like, still kind of like both of them. So see in like 5 years if I like Panini and Tops, like I don't know.
Shout out to Gary here. He said, until they bring back bubblegum, I could care less about modern stuff. That's a good point. That is a phenomenal point, actually. I actually think that would be more innovative than anything Panini has done over the past, couple of years, is bring back that bubblegum, put it in like a heritage set or something, or make like a bubblegum product or something. I don't know. So, Chris, what are your, I know you've been kind of going over your thoughts. So like, what do you think is going to happen here? Like, do you think, like, and maybe that's similar to what the last question was, but like overall, do you think like Panini will ever not exist? Like, do you think that this will make it so that way? Like, do you think that Fanatics would buy Panini and then dissolve it? It's kind of what Elon Musk is doing with Twitter, I guess.
I think they might try and sell off Panini America. I don't know. I think Panini's end game here is to drag this suit out long enough to get a settlement that satisfies them, whether that's selling off Panini America to Fanatics or getting a sub-license from them and continuing to make cards.
And actually, Brody, I'll ask you this question. Do you think Topps or Fanatics should try? I think the sub-licensing I actually think is really interesting. Like, do you think that Fanatics / Topps should come in and maybe try and sub-license brands like Prism or Select and make the cards for their own? Like, do you think that's a possibility, or is that even something that you would really want to see potentially?
I think it would be cool, like, because I think that kind of takes away some of the monopolizing that we've seen, or potentially in the future. I think it would be cool.
Chris, what about you? Do you think that Topps or Fanatics would come in and potentially sub-license any of the Panini brands? Like, do you think that's a possibility?
I don't think they would want to do that, but if it means settling this lawsuit, and again, this all depends on how long this lawsuit is dragged out, how much Fanatics has to spend on lawyer fees. They may settle for that. I know collectors, that's what a lot of us want, is a second licensee. But what we want and what we get isn't necessarily what happens.
Right. Not always the same.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to pull up Panini's statement here and just see if there's anything really, since entering U.S. market in 2009. Panini America's goal has been to bring new collectors and consumers into the trading card category, rejuvenate the marketplace to benefit everyone from mass retailers to hobby stores, our licensed partners at the leagues and players associations, and the individuals. This is a long sentence here. Players associations and individual athletes that we highlight and contract to individual deals to this is an interesting sentence. Again, I don't know. It seems, I mean, we'll see how this ends up going. Panini was the first of any trading card manufacturers to embrace, support, and welcome case breakers into the trading card community. I mean, I suppose that would be, if they're saying that's an innovation, that is definitely, you know, if whatever that means, like, I don't even know exactly what, first to embrace, support, and welcome case breakers. I don't know. Again, I think that they're using a lot of language that can be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very, you can interpret it a bunch of different ways. Which it's probably a legal statement. So like legally they can't say certain things, obviously. And that's probably advised by like lawyers and stuff like that. So, you know, they're using the terms like embrace, support, and welcome. What even really does that mean? If I'm going to be honest, like, so Chris, do you think, you know, breaking, like, do you think breaking is enough of an innovation that that's what they're considering an innovation? Like, that's what they're saying is this thing that they have done better than, I guess, I don't know, Topps or whoever, I guess.
So instead of selling your product to hobby stores and retail stores, you're now saying that because you have this third channel of breakers, you're innovating here. I don't know if that's really all that innovative.
Right.
You found there's these people called breakers now. And
you found out that people like to gamble.
You found out that people like to do this now. Instead of having them buy from distributors, you're going to sell to them directly. That's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, and you know, now with Fanatics Live, I mean, I think that'll be interesting to see sort of how what happens there. So I mean, Brody, you know, I'll ask you this question from when it comes to like breaking and the platforms and Fanatics Live, do you think that Fanatics is going to come in and take over similarly like how they've done with other stuff, like the breaking industry, and everybody's going to have to break on Fanatics Live? Or do you think there's going to be like, you know, there's going to be the whatnots, there's going to be the loops, there's going to be like the drip lives? Like, do you think that those companies will still be able to exist? Or do you think Fanatics is going to kind of come in and kind of take over similarly how they have in the past with other stuff?
I don't know. That's an interesting one. I think that's one that we'll have to see and play out because, I mean, Whatnot's still doing very strong. I mean, they had a huge presence at the National. I mean, there's a ton of breakers that break on YouTube still. Yeah, I think that's one we'll see that plays out, and we'll see how Fanatics plays it in the future.
Yeah, and then I guess maybe I'll ask a similar question to you, Brody, again, with similar to what I just asked Chris. Do you think like embracing breaking is really such an innovative thing, or do you think it's just like they had no choice? Like that's in my opinion, that's sort of how I view it. Like I don't necessarily view it as like Panini went out of their way to make breaking a thing with their products. They really just had no choice because for a number of different reasons. Like do you think that breaking could be what they're sort of talking about here with this like innovative and stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know in 2014 is like the year they're talking about, and Topps had football license in 2014, so Topps could have been doing it at the same time. So I don't know if it's necessarily innovative because Topps could have been doing it at the same time.
Right. Makes sense. I'm going to shout out a comment here, Rex. A sub-license would make the most sense for both companies, and that's probably why it won't happen. Yeah, I mean, it does seem like sometimes within, you know, the card industry, and the thing that most people want ends up not being what really ends up happening. Like I don't think anybody really was like Fanatics should come in and, you know, take over here. So I mean, we'll actually kind of let's see. There's any other comments here that I want to highlight? another Rex comment. Fanatics' long-term goal is definitely to have all of their products broken on their platform. They'll eventually be able to control the primary breaking market by selling only to breakers on their app. So, I mean, Chris, I don't know how into breaking you are necessarily, but do you think that's what's going to happen? Like, I mean, it seems like that would, I guess, make sense if that's what Fanatics is trying to do. But like, do you think
that's
good for them?
When Fanatics first got in 2 years ago, that was their whole goal. They said they wanted to be the end all be all for trading cards. They want to control everything, soup to nuts. They want to be the licensors. They want to be the manufacturers. They want to be the distributors. They want to be the retailers. They want to be the resellers. They even wanted to get into grading, which a lot of people at the time kind of poo-pooed that idea. So, Fanatics wants to be the hobby, but does the hobby want to be a Fanatics experience? I'm not really sure about that. So
yeah, I mean, you know what I think is kind of interesting, I guess, and maybe this is sort of one of the straw man arguments that I was talking about earlier. Is like, everybody sort of complained, or I mean, actually, maybe not. Maybe Chris, you'll be able to speak more to this, since I was I was like 10 in the 90s. Like, were people complaining that there were so many different products? Like, there were so many different companies making products, similarly to how people complain nowadays about how there are so many products within a couple companies. It was kind of just a bunch of companies making products. Now it's a couple companies making a lot of products. Is it a similar narrative, or like, is it different? I guess is maybe my question for you.
I mean, that was the reason why in 2005 why Donruss lost their license. You also have to remember that was the year Fleer went out of business. And they went from 4 licensees to 2, Tops and Upper Deck. And the justification was there were almost 90 different baseball products that were released that year. And there would have probably been more had Fleer not gone out of business. So, with the hobby the way it was in the mid-2000s, wasn't nearly as big as it is now. There was no way that anybody could keep up with this stuff. So, and so they pulled Donruss Playoffs license and let Fleer go away. And for a couple of years, we had only 2 licenses. And it kind of worked. Tops and Upper Deck, the duopoly, it kind of worked for a while. And then, Michael Eisner comes in and throws a big check to MLB, and all of a sudden we only have 1 licensee. So.
Right. Yeah, and we'll kind of, I think this was sort of the plan to this was going to be the main topic here. I guess we'll move on. I guess, Brody, I'll send it to you first. Do you have any final thoughts on this? Like, what are kind of, as we switch topics a little bit here, what are your final thoughts?
I'll be excited to see what happens, and I think it'll go for a while. I'll be excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I mean, I feel like that's kind of how it's been for the past couple of years. It's like we need to sort of see what's going to happen. Chris, I'll ask you. I mean, same question. What are your final thoughts here? What do you think?
Look, I think the strategy here for Panini, I think this is really their 4th and 26 play when they're down, and they just need they need a touchdown, and this is the bomb at the end of the game. This is it for them. And, I think they're not, I don't think that they're even going to expect to win this. I think it's to drag this case as long as possible until they get something out of Fanatics, whether that's a buyout offer or a sub license. So
right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I feel very similarly. I think this is like a last ditch effort attempt to get at whatever they can out of it. Cause like you said, Fanatics took all the licenses. It's like Panini still has some decent licenses. I mean, they still have UFC, they still have WWE. I don't know. They still have, they still have the World Cup license, the FIFA license.
And that's where they make most of their money, by the way.
Right, exactly.
Are those soccer licenses.
Right,
around
exactly.
the world.
So this week we're going to switch topics here. This week, a pretty big news came out about a card that within Magic the Gathering. This is sports cards, collectible stuff like that. So we'll cover this for a little bit, and then we'll kind of move on to the last topic. But the 1/1 Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering card was presumably, I don't know if it was sold this week, but the news came out this week that it's sold for $2 million to the rapper Post Malone. The previous Magic the Gathering record was actually a Post Malone owned card as well. He bought, I believe it was a Black Lotus signed PSA 10 or something like that. I think that's what the card was. He bought that for $800,000. He was talking about that on Howard Stern. I believe he was on a podcast this week talking about how he bought this card for $2 million. I think some reports were saying 2.6. If I'm Post Malone and I'm able to, that's probably just a drop in the bucket for him, to be completely honest. Like he's on tour. He just came out with his album. So like one show that he did probably made him enough money to buy this card, which is pretty wild. So, Chris, I'll start with you. Like, what are your, do you have any thoughts on this card?
Must be great to have $2.6 million to burn on a Magic the Gathering card.
Right, exactly.
I don't collect MTG. I have no idea what makes this card so special. It's a 1/1, I assume. Lord of the Rings, I guess there's like a tie-in with the movies.
I think it's like the ring from the movie, I guess. I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't necessarily understand or know what makes this card. I knew of it because they announced, I think a couple months ago, they announced this card was going to exist, and then it got pulled, and then it got graded, and then it got sold, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, and so Brody, I'll send it over to you. What are your, is this something that you're into? What are your kind of thoughts on the card?
I mean, I'm not a big Magic the Gathering guy, anything like that, but I mean, it's cool that somebody like Post Malone bought it for that much money too. But yeah,
and I think it also kind of brings up the topic of conversation of like celebrities within cards. I think we've seen some celebrities do really good things. I think we've seen some not do some good stuff. So Chris, I'll ask you this question. Do you think like celebrities within cards, what are your kind of thoughts on that? Do you like celebrities getting into cards? I mean, honestly, in my opinion, it really just kind of depends on their intentions. Like, if it's an NFL player who just recently got kicked off of whatnot, then maybe I don't like that as much. But what are your thoughts on celebrities kind of in cards, I guess?
Well, like you said, it depends on their motivation here. Are they here just to make a quick buck, or are they here because they genuinely like to collect cards? I think a lot of the celebrity types that have come into the hobby have been in that former category. They're just, I'm just here to spend a bunch of money and hopefully this is an asset that appreciates, and aren't really into like, I don't know, building a set of something. So, is it good for the hobby? I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe. Is it going to get their fans into card collecting? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and I actually want to. So Logan commented here, another host of the show. He said, "I think Post Malone is a collector," which I do think. I believe he is. I know he's actually talked about. Oop! I just spit all over my monitor. Sorry. He has talked about being, buying Magic the Gathering cards for years, actually, from what I've seen in interviews and stuff like that. I mean, like I said, he bought the Black Lotus for $800,000. I don't know if he necessarily plays, but he does know what the cards are, which I think is really cool. Like there was a video actually that came out of him at like a concert or something, and someone gave him like a pack of the Magic the Gathering cards, and he was flipping through and he knew all the cards, which I thought that was really cool. I mean, that's kind of the point, I think. Like, if a celebrity or somebody, famous can come in and they understand what's going on, we've seen it a billion times with athletes coming into breaks and they don't know anything about cards. And, it's very kind of obvious that they don't know anything, and they're just, they don't know what's in the packs. They don't know what's in it. And, it's a marketing thing. But I think for somebody like Post Malone, I don't necessarily know if he's going to get into, I don't think he's into sports cards necessarily. I think he's obviously more into Magic the Gathering, maybe Pokemon, I guess. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, so Brody, I'll ask you kind of the same question. What are your thoughts on celebrities within the hobby, I guess?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I think it's cool. I mean, are they here to get a quick buck? But I think Post Malone's here because I think he genuinely likes it. I mean, with celebrities too, like some of them I think are here because I think eventually they'll do it with their kids too, which I think is cool, and I support that, obviously. So
right,
I think it's
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there was a comment in the chat about this particular card. This is the first ever.
Oh, here it is.
Serial numbered 1 of 1 Magic, which I kind of find hard to believe that this is the first ever 1 of 1 in the almost 30-year plus history of MTG. So got that for it.
Yeah, I mean, I have like pretty probably below average knowledge on Magic the Gathering, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, I try and kind of at least sort of know what's going on. Like, I know that there was like a controversy where they like were re-releasing old cards in a box, and people were kind of mad about that. I don't remember when that was, probably like a year or two ago. Either way, I mean, yeah, I think it's a really cool card. I mean, the art is obviously really cool. I don't think he I don't know if he plays. I don't think he would play with graded cards necessarily, no. But yeah, either way, I mean, this was one of the cards that kind of was people were pulling together in the news this past week. And then I believe this was breaking as of last night, the 1 of 1 Victor Wembanyama, and this was one of the innovations I think that Fanatics came in. Oh, here it is, the 30th anniversary packs. That's what it was. I think they were re-releasing cards, old cards that were making but they were the same. I think I forget exactly what it was, but it was hurting the rarity of some of the older cards because they were re-releasing them, I think. And also the price. I think the price point was like extremely high. I think it was like a National Treasures level price point. Not, obviously, I'm just using that kind of as in relating it to sports cards. But yeah, so like I said, the 1 of 1 Victor Wembanyama Superfractor has been pulled. I think the autographs are live from this product. So if you pull, but it's a redemption for Wembanyama, unfortunately. But either way, I think if you pull the redemption, you would be able to get the card if you pull it. But yeah, so I mean, Wembanyama kind of I don't know if necessarily we're gonna see like the huge crazy spike the way we did with Zion when it came to like a kind of a crazy prospect. So Brody, I'll kick it to you. Like, what do you think of Wembanyama? Do you think he, maybe not necessarily if he's a good player or not, because we don't really know, but like, what do you think of the hype? Do you think it's as crazy as it was with Zion, or you think it's definitely, in my opinion, it's definitely dialed down a little bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's as crazy as Zion, but I'd say it's probably the biggest hype since Zion, because people are pretty excited about him, and there hasn't been a big prospect in San Antonio for a long time. I mean, this is a pretty cool card. The awesome card, 1 of 1. Pretty awesome.
Definitely. Chris, same with you. What are kind of your thoughts on this card?
I'm kind of curious how this would compare and contrast with the first Panini Prism 1 of 1 in an NBA uniform. Mm-hmm. Which one would be more desirable? I would probably guess that it would be the Prism card because it's licensed. Is this, how much do you think a card like this would go for? I don't think this is a 7-figure card, mainly because
I don't
he's
think
not
so.
it may be his first, but it's still not an NBA licensed card, though.
I thought Golden had one of his other from Bowman's Best. Didn't he have the auto superfractor and 8.5, I think? Golden had one of them from Bowman's Best, I think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I don't remember. I don't know if they sold it or if it's on sale right now. Let me actually just look it up real quick, see if I can find it. But I'll keep sort of talking here. I think.
But that one was auto too. So
right. Let's see. How do I don't even. Sometimes these. Yeah. Here we go. Wembanyama. I'll search Wembanyama. Oh yeah. Here it is. I think. No. That's just a regular one. I don't know. I can't find it. It's a. Sometimes these auction houses are a little bit too hard to to search for. But either way, so I agree with you, Chris. I'll be interested to see, if the one of one coming out of Prism ends up being more desirable, or if it's the same, or what ends up being. I do think in my opinion, I think this card may end up if obviously he has to pan out as a player. He can't just pull like a Zion and be like a prospect that just at this point I could consider Zion a prospect who hasn't panned out. Maybe he turns his career around. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. We'll see. But I think I mean personally, I think that this will be the card just because of how innovative. Honestly, I think the Bowman U product has become now that Topps has been able to come in and grab the NIL license. I'll be interested to see if this card grades. I mean, it looks pretty centered in my opinion. I think so. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets a 9 or 10, which would be pretty cool. And I would suppose this card will probably be on the auction block at some point soon. I mean, now this is kind of one of the cool things with social media, I suppose, is the fact that we know that this card has been pulled. Obviously, it was pulled by Bleacher Breaks. And so we know that the card actually exists, where in the past, stuff like that hasn't really happened. Abel actually in the comments here had to go on that I was going to mention too. In the Panini packs from the National, he had a Spurs jersey, like a card with the Spurs jersey, which would have been which now that's his first. And I don't know if there are numbered versions of that card, but that will be his first Spurs card coming out of the National packs, which correct me if I'm wrong, I think that they used to do college versions of those cards in National packs, and I think this is the first year that they've done. I'm not sure if you guys know, is this the first year that they've done the licensed cards, like the NBA cards in these National packs?
Yeah, because I think Zion was in a Duke uniform, so
right.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be an interesting card to watch now that we know that the card exists for sure. And we're actually kind of coming up on the end of the show here. I think we'll probably wrap up with some final comments. I always like to make sure that we get the final comments in. Chris, I'll start with you. You have any final comments on the show today?
Do I have to say one thing that I did not say last week? And that's keep on rocking in the free world.
That's right.
Got to get my gimmick in.
Of course, yeah, on the stage of the National, yeah. That which I believe that audio and the video is that up on the Hobby Hotline channel?
I believe it's up somewhere.
Okay, yeah. If you check the Hobby Hotline Twitter, I'll see if we've tweeted it out. But if you want to catch us, we were on the main stage last week at the National. I don't know if I mentioned that at all, but that was really cool. Like I said, that the video should be live somewhere. I think if you go to YouTube, if Hobby Hotline, it should be there. Brody, same with you. I'll kick it to you. What's your final comments on today's show?
It's International Trading Card Day, so I'm probably going to be heading out to a shop. And, man, fun show. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Love that. And like I said, we will be back here next Saturday on Bench Clear Media. Shout out to everybody in the comments. Shout out to everybody watching from all around the country, all around the world. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye. Oh, I forgot I need to pull this up.